Hey guys, this is GameSitWatch and today we are going to jump into video game development. Before I get into anything, let me just quickly show you the point where we get to at the end of this episode. So what you are seeing is our player character. I can control him, move him around. Let's chase these birds away. Alright, as you can see, if we go anywhere near them, they fly away. That's basically the point where we get to at the end of this episode. This is a game already, although there's not much to it. But for first episode, I think it's a good point to finish. I've created a mock-up of how the game is going to function, how it's going to work in Photoshop. Let's jump into that and see how it works. What you see on the screen is a rudimentary view of the play area. Circled in red is our player character, the child. He's the one you're going to control. Marked with the green stripes are solid objects like benches, statues, things that you can bump into. And those specks on the screen are the birds, marked with blue. Those are the ones that you will have to chase away to clear the level. The idea of the game came to me while I was sitting on a bench in a park. That was before pandemic, so there were actually people around. And there was this young kid, like 2 years old or something like that. He was running around in the park trying to chase different birds, like pigeons mostly. And every time he reached the bird and it flew away, he was laughing uncontrollably and he was yelling, "Silly bird, silly bird." So that is what the game is going to be about. You are going to have to chase the birds off the screen, off the play area before the timer runs out and mom says that, "Okay kiddo, it's time to go home." That is going to be one level. It's a bit more complicated than that, but this is the essence of the game in general. One of the features that I didn't mention so far is that if you've ever seen a 2-year-old walk around, they're not exactly stable, like not the most steady. Every time they try to move from point A to point B, they sometimes speed up, they slow down, they stagger to the left, stagger to the right. They kind of move like drunks. Like it's really pretty much the same thing. They're not very stable. Generally giving up motor control at any age is not really a good idea. Sadly, I can speak from experience. So yeah, it's not a good idea. Don't try it at home, folks. Really, seriously. Don't do it. But it doesn't change the fact that kids aren't necessarily the most stable when they walk around, especially when they're running. So I am going to try and implement this into the game, not in this episode. For now, we're just going to have we're going to have a completely different type of control than what it is going to be at the end of the development cycle. And we'll see how it works. It will add to the difficulty in general, I would think. But that's not going to be the only thing that will make the life of this child a little bit more interesting, so to speak. The task at hand a bit more complex. Certain birds behave in different ways. For example, if you look at this bird, if you get close enough with the player character, the child, when it gets into his circle of influence, the bird is going to fly away off the screen, and that's good. That's like thumbs up. But some birds are actually going to stop before they get off the screen. They are going to settle down in a different spot and you will have to chase them again. And also some birds you will chase away off the screen and then they will return, they will come back and settle down at different spots, so you will have to chase them again. And I would like to add a whole lot of different features, power-ups, like let's say you can call a dog to your aid. A dog is going to come bark and run around and chase the birds away. Or like a kid on a bike is going to ride through the square and chase the birds away. And there also can be stuff that actually makes things more difficult, like the pensioner lady that is present in every park that I've ever been to, who throws bread to the birds, attracting more of them, and just generally reposition or group them up in a certain place. It actually can be a good thing, might help you. But the point is that we are going to add a few features to make the game a little bit more complex. But the main thing is that it's like a one-tap control. Basically one tap, two tap. Like if you tap the screen once, your player character, the child, will rotate and face that way. And then you double tap and he will start to move and try to get to that direction. It might not happen in a straight line. Like I said, he's going to be moving like a bit of a drunk person. Speed up, slow down, move left, move right. And obviously, if the child bumps into something, then he might just fall down on his butt and start crying maybe. I could also add things to make things a little bit more difficult, like cracks in the surface of the ground where you move and it makes you unsteady, or it makes you change direction. So basically the point is that it's going to be a little bit unpredictable, but there are certain obstacles that you can look at on the screen and you want to avoid them. For example, if there's a puddle on the square somewhere and your child moves into that, and if you happen to fall there on your butt and get completely soaked, then mom will just come and take you home. Like, that's it. That's the end of the level. That's like an instant fail. You're gonna have to try again. All in all, I think this game is something that can be completed in, let's say, like about 100 hours at best. Which probably means that I'm going to work on it for about 300. That's something that I've learned from making a game before. But you are going to be here with me for the entire thing. So please, if you think that this is something that is going to be useful to you, just hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel. You really are helping me out to actually make this happen. Okay, I think that's about enough for what the features of the game is going to be like. So let's actually start developing the game. Let's jump into it and make a child. I don't know, that sounded kind of weird. But we are going to make a child in Photoshop. So basically what we're going to do is start with a simple, let's do 1080p. I think the easiest way to do a top-down character is to start with the shoulders. You can do a round rectangle. This one, I think I am going to make this a little bit more round. Let's see, like 120 pixels. No, that's way too round. 80? Yeah, that seems about right. You can just use the pen tool, like I added another anchor there, and holding control is how you manipulate your shapes in Photoshop. So you select with control and you hold control to manipulate a certain anchor. We have our child's body. Now let's make a head, which is going to be a circular shape, of course. You gotta hold shift if you want it to be a perfect circle. Let's change the color of that circle, like something of a skin color. I mean, it's a bit too pink maybe, kind of dark, very tan kid. And now let's add some hair. So just duplicate the layer. Create a dark hair. There it is. Obviously it doesn't look like hair at this point, so I am going to just add a whole lot of anchors to my circle. I'm just using left clicks at this point. Don't have to hold any key. Basically, what I'm trying to do is not to use too many hotkeys. In order to select an anchor you already have, you have to hold Control, and then if you keep holding Control, you can actually manipulate that anchor. You can manipulate anything basically on the screen, not just the anchor, but the lines as well. So yeah, I'm making some hair. Another disclaimer, I'm going to have a few of these. It's not going to be the most, well, that kind of sounds weird. I mean, I wanted to say that it's not going to be the most beautiful child ever, but, you know, it's mine. I love him. So, yeah, deal with it. I know you look weird, kiddo, but I love you all the same. Oh, I gotta rotate this because this looks weird. I'm trying to make this as random as possible. You know, it's going to be pretty small on the screen, so I'm really not aiming to make it the most accurate representation, because it really doesn't matter. Like I said before, this is not the next Grand Theft Auto or Cyberpunk 2177. I think I should add a nose. I think every kid functions better if they have a nose. So yeah, let's add a nose. Make it the same color. And yeah, we should probably add some highlights. This basically just makes it a little bit more believable. Doesn't have to be super accurate. Just put down a few anchor points. And yeah, I think we will be able to duplicate this and transform it, manipulate it. It has to be a little bit of a lighter color. Basically, if you haven't figured out by now, art is mostly about making things quite random, but at the same time follow a certain pattern. That's what it's all about. Especially if you make something that exists in reality, then obviously you have to follow the basic rules of nature. You can't just go around and change those because it wouldn't feel right at the end. But yeah, with something like this simplistic game, you really don't have to care about the laws of light and all that. And like, really, it doesn't matter. I'm going to add an extra line just kind of to make it seem like there's a t-shirt with a seam. I think that's good enough for now. This is going to be our child. Awesome. I love him already. It's always a very good idea to name your layers as soon as possible, just to stay organized. Now, in order for this to work, we are going to have to export this image. PNG is the file format that you really want if you want the background to be transparent. So if you see this checkerboard in the background, this is going to be transparent, which is always good because there are going to be things underneath, like the background in this case. It's a top-down view game, and you want only the child to be visible. Don't want a white square around him. So the format you're going to export it as is PNG. Size doesn't really matter at this point. This is something that we will have to optimize as we go on. I also want to do a little bit of animation. So I think it's really going to be simple, as simple as possible in this episode. For the kid, just adding 2 additional frames, and then we are going to change them back and forth. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, like walking. It's not all that complicated. Round rectangle probably should be the way to go. But I'm going to make it a darker one, and these will represent the shoes. Doesn't have to be amazing, like no shading or nothing like that. Depending on how much time I have, how I stand with resources, how life goes in general, I might polish it a lot more eventually. But for all intents and purposes, this is going to be just fine for now. So you want to basically do like halfway and then full reach and go back and forth from, like, idle is going to be the first frame, obviously. You'll see. Okay, I think we can move on to create a pigeon. That should be the next thing. I think it's best to start with a rounded rectangle, same way as we started creating the child. I actually don't need it to be this big, and then just manipulate it same way. Control is your friend. Then I'm going to add a few anchors. This is going to be the head. Yeah, that's a bit of a skinny pigeon, so. It kind of looks like a chess figure at this point. To be honest with you, I'd never made a pigeon before. I mean, I never made a child either, so. Alright. I also gotta add the beak. What color is a beak of a pigeon? I think it's like a gray. Yeah, it looks a bit weird, I know. But don't worry, we will fix that. And now it looks like a really fat pigeon. Alright. That should work. We will also export this as a PNG. It wouldn't be a pigeon if it couldn't fly, so yeah, let's add a frame for that as well. Spread our wings, or rather our pigeon's wings. Using the exact same method, I'm still working in Photoshop. Adding anchors, holding control to manipulate them. Finally, I think it's time that we actually make a background. Now it could be tiles, like depending on how big the game is, the best bet for resource management is always to make everything as small as possible in size. So tiled backgrounds are generally a pretty good idea, but this is not going to be a very resource intense, like not a very demanding game. So I think I'm just going to very rapidly make a simple 1080p background and use that for now. So let's just fill the entire background with a solid color, and then we're going to open the filter gallery in Photoshop. And I think what works best for our purposes is the mosaic tiles. It can be a little bit of a lighter color. Like it is a background, so it can't be too intrusive, so to speak. And now that we have our background, our player character, and our main enemy in the game, I think it's about time we start to build our engine. I'm going to use GDevelop 5 to actually build a game. It's a framework to build a game without really having to code, although already in this episode I will have to show you how there are certain things that are built into GDevelop 5 that you can just use. Other people made it, but also if you want to customize, then you can do that as well. Eventually you might need to write some sort of a code. It's really not that complicated. I mean, it is not like you have to learn a completely new language, not even close. So here we are in GDevelop. Let's just create a brand new project. You could use all these templates for different sort of things, but what we are going to do is an empty game, completely new game from scratch. Overall game settings, not really important at this point, but yeah, you can add certain properties like the name of the game, Silly Bird, display GDevelop splash at startup, really doesn't matter. I'll just leave it there for now. Version number is going to be 0.0.1. Package name com.gamesitwatch.sillybird. I am GameSitWatch. Don't care about registering the project right now. Game resolution, I'm planning to make it in 1080p, so that's what we're going to change it to. Change width to fit the screen or window size. Update resolution during the game to fit the screen or window size. Sure. I think minimum FPS should be 30. Device orientation, landscape, that's fine. Scale mode, linear, don't care about it for now. Project file type. Multiple files saved in folder next to the main file. It makes it easier to see the structure of the game as you're building it. Add mob, don't care about it. Firebase, don't care about it. Global variables, icons, resources, we don't care about for now. Let's just add a brand new scene and let's start with that. It's called new scene for now, but we will call it demo. So that's our scene, and let's edit our scene. You don't see any properties for now because nothing is selected. In order for something to happen, you have to have objects. Everything basically is an object. For example, the background is going to be an object. Let's add that. Add new object. Easiest way to add it is if you use a tiled sprite. Let's call it bg1 and select an image. Choose new image. These files are outside the project folder. Would you like to make a copy of them in your project folder first? Recommended, sure, of course, why not? Let's hit OK. We don't need to edit it right now, but we are going to change the default width and height, 1920 and 1080, and apply. As you can see, you cannot see it actually still, so what you want to do is drag it onto the scene, and then you move it so that it fits the screen. At this point, you might want to just change the properties so that it snaps perfectly. So what we're going to do is change these to 0, both the x and the y coordinates. So that makes sure that we have the background right where we want to be. And if we want to make sure that it stays there, we got to lock the position in the editor. Z order is similar to how Photoshop works. There are different layers, and one is basically the most underneath layer of everything. If you add something with Z order 2, that will be on top of an object that is Z order 1. Base layer is something that is specific to GDevelop 5. There are certain types of built-in layers that behave differently, like there's a UI layer, there's a base layer. Different layers behave differently. The size is fine as it is. Okay, so now let's add our player character. So add a new object. This is going to be a sprite. Let's name it child1. Add an animation. You can add the image itself here. And this will be the idle position of the child, so let's call this idle. Let's add another animation. Gotta start with the same thing, the base, and then add the different frames that we've created in Photoshop for the animation itself. Basically, I'm using 3 frames, and this is only the left foot, so let's add the right foot as well. But before we can do that, we obviously have to add another idle phase, and then we go on with the right foot. And we don't have to add the idle again at the end because it is going to loop, but we will have to make sure that that is actually what's happening by checking the box here. Let's name this walk. Okay, so we have our child object. Let's also add him to the scene. There he is. Now we gotta add some pigeons. Add another new object. It's going to be a sprite all the same. Let's call it pigeon1. Let's add an animation. This will be the idle animation, which basically means that it's not going to be animated. We exported this pigeon slightly differently, added a bit more canvas around it, because there is a limitation in how GDevelop works with hitboxes. So basically, if I want a bigger hitbox than the image itself, that's not possible with GDevelop. I have to add extra canvas. This is a workaround. This is something that they are working on, so it might be fixed in future updates. But for now, this is the way it has to work. Let's name this pigeon idle. Add another animation. Once again, start with the idle one and then add the one with the spread wings and then hit loop. So that's going to be our pigeon. And now you got to add a few instances of this object to the scene. So you just got to drag them onto the screen. And we are going to vary these pigeons a little bit. Like it doesn't look right if they all look the same and they all face the same direction. So let's just turn them around here and there and change the size of the different pigeons. So you got to select the pigeon you want to edit. This here resizes the pigeon. This will rotate. So let's rotate our pigeon. If I would want to resize it like this, I could do, but I don't really need to. So let's just keep resizing and turning the different pigeons. Make some of them smaller, some would be bigger, rotate in different directions. To be honest, this is a bit too big. Some pigeons are fat, but probably not this fat. Alright, so we have a variety of pigeons. Now if I would check how the game runs at this point, I can do so, but nothing's really going to happen. Let me just show you. This button here is what you need. So there we are. I cannot control anything. Like, doesn't matter what I press, nothing is happening. We just see what's going on. Oh, Jesus, I just realized that I actually used the wrong background. Okay, let me fix that. If I launch it, this is how it looks. Wow, these pigeons are a bit too big actually. I'm going to have to make them smaller. Also, let's group them a little bit tighter. Yeah, something like this. So we've added all the assets that we really need. Let's start adding the code. Build the engine of the game. What we're going to have to do, on one hand we can click on our object called the child 1. There's a tab called behaviors, so let's click on that and add the behavior to the object. As you can see, there is an option called top-down movement. This is not how it's going to work eventually. But for now, just for testing purposes, I think this is a good option to start with. As you can see, there are all kinds of different options. Acceleration, angle offset, deceleration, max speed, rotate speed, and such. Not going to care about any of this, just going to use the default everything, because like I said, eventually we are going to use different controls for our player character. This helps to see if things work the way we want to. So let's launch a preview. I'm using the arrow keys. There it is. Our character is moving. There is no animation. Like, there are no left foot, right foot, nothing. It's just sliding, very smooth. Probably not how a kid moves. Although by the end of this episode, he's going to be still very smooth, but at least he's going to be animated. I also want to try maybe to see if I can move him and interact with the pigeons. I can stand underneath a pigeon, which is probably not the way it should be. All of the pigeons are floating above me. So obviously we are going to change that as well. let's get to it. In order to build the engine of our game, we have to go to events of the scene, which you can find up here amongst the tabs. So click on that and let's add a new event. There's a certain kind of logic you have to apply to video games, and I think it's much easier to understand through examples. So I will add a condition and then you will see how it works in practice. So let's click on add condition. I'll choose the object as the child, and the condition is going to be whether the child is moving or not. As you can see, GDevelop immediately adds the behavior to see if the object is moving, the top-down movement behavior. The reason we're doing this is because we want to animate this poor kid. Like, he's not going to be just sliding around, but he has to move his feet to get somewhere. I think we're going to make things worse for him. It would be much easier if he didn't have to do that, but this is not an ice skating ring, so yeah, let's make him animated. So let's click OK. So the condition is if the child is moving or not. This is what the engine is going to check. If the child is moving, then certain things are going to happen. And this is what we'll add by adding an action. So let's click that. Once again, select the child. And let's find animation in this menu. We want to change the animation when the child is moving. Makes sense, right? So if you remember, the animation of certain objects was numbered. The idle was number 0. The walk animation was number 1. So what we're going to do is we are going to click this and hit set to. If the child is moving, set to 1. The value is going to be 1. If the child is moving according to top-down movement behavior, then we will change the animation value to 1. Let's hit OK. And let's test this. So I'm using the arrow keys again. And there you go. He's walking. Oh, I didn't stop walking. Why that is, I'll show you in a sec. Let's add a new event. Condition. If the child is moving, but let's invert the condition so the child is not moving. And let's change the number of the animation back to 0. Let's test this again. He's moving. He's not moving. He's moving. He's not moving. Perfect. Now we got to make him interact with those pigeons. So let's add a new event. Somewhat easier to do this by using the pigeons first as the object. So what happens if they collide? If you remember, we made the pigeon image having a bigger canvas. So when I'm talking about collision, they won't actually collide but it's still thought of as a collision by the engine. This is based on hitboxes, which you can change, but you can only make them smaller than the image itself, not bigger, which is why I've added extra canvas. But let's choose collision for now. Collision is obviously between two objects, so the collision is going to happen between pigeon and child. So I'm choosing that. Ignore objects that are touching each other on their edges but are not overlapping. Let's leave it at no for now. So let's add an action as to what happens if the pigeon is colliding with the child. Let's move the pigeon by adding a force. And this says add a force to move toward an object. We are going to use this, but we are going to use this to move away from the object. The object is the child. And the speed is going to be -50. This is how you can make the pigeon move away from the child by adding a negative number. So instead of moving toward the object, it's going to move the other way. Basically, it's moving toward the object with a speed of -50. Let's do 50. We have two further options here. The force will only push the object during the time of 1 frame. This is not what we want. We want this force to be permanent, like it has to keep pushing our bird until it leaves the screen. And let's just test this as well. So let's move the child around. Oh, you see, how about that? They are, well, I don't know what exactly you would call this, what they're doing, but they are going off the screen. The birds are going away. It works as intended. So let's keep going. One of the things that you can notice straight away is that the birds are not animated. So let's change that. And you don't really have to add a new event because you want to change the animation at the time when the collision happens. So let's just add a new action to the pigeon. Change the animation, and it's the same thing as with the child. Set it to 1, hit OK. Let's test it once again. And now they are flying, although, yeah, they're flying in a rather strange direction. Yeah, that's still not good enough. So we got to rotate those birds around. Let's do that. So I will create a variable. Now variables, they are basically stored values of anything that happens in the game. For example, the way I want to do this is by storing the value of the angle between the pigeon and the child. I tried other ways, but this is the way it works the best. So what we're going to do is click on the tab Other Actions. You can see variables here. So let's choose value of a scene variable. Let's name this variable child angle. And set it to angle to object. And the way you're going to do this is by adding the name of the object. Dot is to separate the name of the object from the actual action. And this will be angle to object. And then you have to add the name of the other object that you want to compute the angle to. It's going to be pigeon 1. Now, I know this seems like a complicated thing, like how the hell did I came up with this? It wasn't easy, I'm going to tell you this much. It took me a while to figure out that this is actually something that is possible, that angle to object is something built into GDevelop 5. This is something that exists, but it is something you can do. I figured as much when I was building this part of the game. Obviously, if the game can push an object to a certain direction with a permanent force based on what the angle to another object is, then obviously this has to be something that exists. So that was my thinking. So I found this eventually, and yeah, this is what we're going to use. So we set this variable child angle to what the angle is. Now, if you imagine the child is facing in a certain direction, looking at that direction, if the pigeon is right in front of him, then the angle is 0. If the pigeon is in a different position, then the angle is going to be something other than 0. It's going to be between 0 and 360, basically. And what we're going to do with this instruction is that we will create a variable which has a value of whatever that angle is. So if the pigeon is 150, then the value of the variable called child angle is going to be set to 150. This is how it works. We will add a number to the variable called child angle. It's going to be set to that number. Whatever the angle to the pigeon is going to be that value. And then we're going to use that value to manipulate the pigeon. So what we really want to do is rotate that pigeon around before it starts flying, because currently it doesn't look right. We want the pigeon to face the direction it's going, right? And now that we have this value of the variable set, let's add the action that rotates the pigeon around. So you want to rotate your pigeon towards an angle, and you just want to add the name of your variable, starting with variable. Do it like this: variable, parentheses, child angle, parentheses closed. As for angular speed, what we have to do is to put it to 0, because if we put it to anything higher, then it will simply not have enough time to perform the action. So you just got to do it 0 for now. You can drag any kind of action and move it up to the top of the event. So let's do that. Let's move this as well, because you obviously want the pigeon to rotate first and then start moving with a permanent force, and change the number of the animation at that time. Like, you don't want the pigeon to start flying before it rotates, right? So the order is always top to bottom. Let's try this and see if it works. So here we are. Let's move our child towards the pigeons. And as you can see, he's doing just that. And this basically got to where we really wanted to get at the end of the first episode. I think it's a good idea to wrap it up here. Thank you for watching this far. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned a few things. If you did, definitely like and subscribe if you want to watch more. See you next time.